Hey everyone, my name is Merle van Akker. I am the president of the WBIT Insights team, but today I won't be having any managing capacity. I will just be here and talk about the intersection between behavioral science and technology because I'm also a PhD student at the behavioral science group in the business school. I normally study contactless, so I'm really well versed in payment methods, and today I'll actually be talking about money. So, money from a historical perspective is actually really interesting. And the reason why is that in a relatively short time, money has had very different shapes. So, money actually came about when it became quite clear that barter or direct trade is quite inconvenient. So, what do I mean with direct trade? I mean, if I wanted a chicken, then I would have to trade something else, so a good or a service directly for it. For example, a bale of hay. So I would go to a market or directly to a chicken farmer with my bale of hay, try to negotiate whether the farmer would accept one bale of hay for one chicken, make a trade, and we'd move on with our lives. However, you can see that this is quite inconvenient. If I want more than 10 chickens, I'm gonna have to carry quite a lot of hay, and we haven't even gotten into the issues with perishable goods. So, direct trade or barter was, although persistent for a very long time, is really inconvenient. So, it's not very surprising that it was, you know, uh, replaced by something different. So, the first replacement of direct barter was value holding materials such as beads and pretty shells. However, you determine how much a pretty shell is worth because I don't know. So again, this system was quite flawed. The system that we've now been on the longest, or at least a derivative of that system, is that we've had coins that actually reflected worth. So the metal or the material they were made of was actually worth something in itself. So think of copper, silver, and gold coins. And that is actually the origin of cash. So, cash we've had for quite a long time, and this progression actually describes, I would say, most of the evolution of money up until the 20th century. Now, somewhere at the end of the 19th, start of the 20th, we actually, instead of carrying around massive amounts of gold coins, or coins in any other shape or form, or banknotes, which also made its introduction, it was argued that that was quite inconvenient. If you had to carry 500 pounds worth of money, nowadays we would consider that a very strange decision, very unsafe, probably not smart. And why would you carry that much money if you could just carry around a single checkbook in which you could just write down how much you owed someone, hand it over to them, and Bob's your uncle? Check has also fallen out of favor because why would you pay someone by check? Why would you carry around an entire checkbook if you could just very easily swipe your card, tap your card, just pay by card? But then again, why would you still pay by a plastic card which you're probably holding in the wallet that is attached to your phone or your phone wallet, because you could just pay with your phone? And by the end of the day, do we really still need to leave our house to pay or buy anything to begin with? And the answer, technically speaking, is no, because you can order pretty much anything online from the comfort of your bedroom. So, when it comes to money or payment methods specifically, we've seen a massive evolution, but the evolution isn't done yet. For example, Amazon is trying Amazon Go, a store in which you enter the store and you take the product or products that you want and you walk out. I feel like we're missing a key part here in the shopping or the purchasing process, but Amazon is actually quite eager to cut the process of paying or the entire, paying for what you owe. It wants to cut it out. And I can understand why it wants to cut it out, but I'm here to warn you that the further we deviate from cash, probably the worse it is. Especially for cutting out payment as a process completely. And in today's talk, I'm actually going to outline why that is and what you can actually do about it. So the reason that things like Amazon Go or the further and further removal from cash is actually bad, according to me, is because we have such a thing as the theory of the pain of paying. This theory was coined in 1996 and is quite a famous theory within the field of behavioral economics. It was coined or created by Ufo Zellermeyer, and it actually focuses on the emotions, but predominantly the negative emotions that we experience when we pay for something. Now, why do we experience negative emotions? because we are loss averse. So this is another really famous theory in behavioral economics. Unsurprisingly, it has won a Nobel Prize, or at least the people who came up with it, Kahneman and Tversky, have won Nobel Prizes. But what this theory argues is that we don't like losing things. And paying is literally handing over money, and as such you are losing money. Sure, you're gaining something new, like a product, a good or service, in return, but you first have to lose the money. So this is actually painful, and I keep calling it painful because it actually shows up in the brain as well, meaning that a couple of neuroscientific studies have shown increased activity in the insular cortex, and the insular cortex in our brain is linked to the experience of physical pain. So yes, paying is actually physically painful. Now, what does this theory of the pain of paying argue? It argues that not all payment methods are equal. So a payment method can be valued in about 3 different factors. So a payment method can be very physical, meaning if you have to hand it over. So if I want to pay by cash, I have to physically hand you the cash. That's a very physical payment method. Cards, I have to tap or swipe them on a terminal, not at all physical. Then the payment method can be quite limited. Once you've spent a £50 note of cash, that's it. The cash doesn't magically regenerate. However, if you have plastic cards, especially if they're linked to a bank account which can hit overdraft, the payment method is not as limited, because you can actually get into debt by getting out more money, but you do continuously have access to money. So not that limited. And the third last factor is the transparency of the payment method. So what do I mean with transparency? I mean that the payment method itself reflects how much it is worth, how much is being spent, and how much is left. So with cash, for example, if I give you a £50 note because I want to pay for my shopping, which was £25, then I get £25 back, but I've also given £25 away. And this is all very, very visible. If I do this with a credit card, a debit card, potentially even my phone, what happens is that I don't actually hand over the device, so it's not that physical at all, but what I'm handing over is also not reflecting the value of what I'm handing over. For example, on a credit card, it doesn't say that you've spent £25, but it also doesn't say how much you have left. So, as I've very clearly exemplified with these descriptions, with these examples, is that cash satisfies all these 3 criteria, and unsurprisingly, as a result, is very, very painful. But debit cards, credit cards, and mobile payments don't actually satisfy these criteria at all, so they are a lot less painful. Now, what happens if a payment method gets a lot less painful? It gets a lot easier to spend, because you don't expect the pain, but you also don't experience the pain. So spending is easier. And this isn't just something I've just come up with. There's actually a lot of research on this, especially on the credit card, which has shown that people who use credit cards as compared to cash, because the credit card was one of the earliest payment methods to be introduced, somewhere in the 1960s it was popularized in America, but also came across to the UK. What they've actually shown is, when comparing credit card to cash, is that people who use credit cards spend more at the point of sale, so in a single purchase. They spend more on a monthly or weekly or a yearly basis. They have a higher willingness to pay, which is a theoretical measure of how much you would be willing to spend for something as if you had to buy it. So spending is easier. Research has also shown that you spend more frequently. This is probably because you've got more access to money. But this is not exactly where it ends. So the reason that it is assumed that people spend more frequently and spend more is because people tend to forget how much they have already spent using the credit card. People are quite bad at recalling their expenditure to begin with. Quick shout out. But it is much better with cash than it is with credit card. So people who use credit cards are a lot more forgetful, and as a result they tend to spend money twice, which actually shows up as people forgetting that they've already spent money and then spending it again because they thought they still had it, but they didn't. So these are just a few things that purchasing with a credit card does. There's many more factors that are influenced. I think people with credit cards also spend more impulsively. They're less attached to the products or goods that they have purchased on credit card as compared to cash. And of course all of this research will be linked down below. I can back myself up, don't worry. And this is just a credit card, as I said. There is research on the debit card as well, but it's very few, so the willingness to pay is also higher with debit cards compared to cash. We've looked into contactless payment methods as well, so that is my own field of study. We see very similar things. We see higher expenditure at the point of sale. We see that people are forgetting. We see that people purchase more frequently. And then this also replicates for the mobile phone. So for the mobile phone, on top of seeing all the aforementioned, we also see that people who predominantly use mobile spending actually also exhibit other very costly debt behaviors. So very costly debt behaviors are often associated with running an overdraft or a total on your credit card, which is very expensive debt. But it can also be associated with having payday loans, which is an even more expensive form of debt. So it seems that people who use mobile spending seem to just lose control slightly over their own personal finances. And this is not very surprising because another research, again will be linked down below, has actually found that people who predominantly use mobile phone spending don't at all experience the same pain of paying, and that mobile phone payments might actually be the least painful of them all. So if you are a frequent mobile phone payment user, or you've been thinking about it, you should probably be a bit more wary and a bit more conscious of what this payment method is doing for you. Now, this is a summit on behavioral science and technology, or at least the interaction between the two. Now, I'm not here to spew the gospel of let's go back to cash, let's leave technology behind. First of all, I don't believe in it. I do think with good science you should be able to overcome most issues, preach. Second of all, I also think it's not a feasibility. When we look at cash is on its way out. There are several countries, such as Canada, Sweden, and India, who have made very, very clear that they want to get rid of cash. They want to have a full online cash system. They want to go e-money all the way. Cryptocurrency is becoming more and more popular. I'm not sure whether it's a viable payment method or will be within the next 10 years, but it is coming up. And if we're being really, really honest, generations that we're raising now barely interact with cash, and they mostly interact with their mobile phone. It's like another limb. So we can keep cash alive no matter what. Especially in the West, it should to some extent be a viable option, but we've also seen within other countries and other political and economical systems that to some extent cash isn't actually an option to begin with. Cash isn't safe, cash isn't secured, cash isn't trusted, and cash is actually quite easy to steal. So cash is on its way out, whether we like it or not, so we better scientifically prepare for its way out and move into the future. And given the technology that we have and given the behavioral science that we know, we should be able to do this. So assume that the future is nigh, the future is already here, and that we actually have gone full mobile. Because to be quite honest, I don't think plastic cars will be around much longer either. There are entire countries that have skipped from cash immediately to spending on the mobile phone and haven't really paused for the plastic card. China is a great example of this. The app WeChat is essentially a payment app, a social app. It has everything within that app. And I think that might actually become the future. The thing is, just because that's the future doesn't mean we just have to lay down and accept whatever the consequences are. There is a way of managing the consequences of mobile spending that I've just outlined, which are not very positive, and actually take control of them. And the way to do this is to look at cash and try to best emulate the benefits of cash. And the benefits of cash are ingrained within the pain of paying. So even if we're spending online, even if we're exclusively spending on mobile, we have to be able to make that painful for us again, as great as that sounds. So what can you actually do? Assume that you're, offline in real life and you're spending on your mobile. Now, spending on the mobile is easy because you always have access to money. So accessibility and limitation is very likely to be a criteria that we can, satisfy. What we can do, however, is just make it more painful by priming our own behavior. Now, you can actually prime the pain of paying. What you have to do is to just go through everything you've already spent, which is a nice mental exercise, before you even enter the store. Some people can also just open their banking app and look at their bank balance, be shocked by how low it is because it's always lower than you expect, and then, start to deliberate whether they really need to go into the store, and once in the store, if they really feel comfortable doing a lot of impulse purchases given the not so great amount of money that's left. However, for example, if you've just had your payday, your bank balance is going to be a lot higher, and this might not work. So you can try this Prime, but it only works under certain circumstances. A Prime that does work very often is, like I said, go through everything you've spent already that day, that week, that month, whatever works best for you, and then see that you've spent quite a lot already. We have an average of approximately 100 expenditures per month. That's quite a lot, and they do add up. So you can use this. And by priming yourself with this pain of paying, you'll become much more deliberative, and you'll become much more hesitant towards buying more. So what we've done here is that we've moved the decision from system 1, which is very much, ooh, I want this, how nice, this would be nice to have, whatever, to a slightly more deliberative system, which is system 2, where we're like, oh, I don't actually have that much money. Do I really need this? Can I really afford this? And as such, we might actually not even enter the store. Instead of, checking our phone and our bank balances in the checkout line, we might just completely leave it. So probably before you even leave the house, prime yourself with the pain of paying to make sure you don't, on your way to class or on your way to work, buy that Starbucks coffee or just hop into the store for a freshly baked croissant. Just don't do it. Just prime yourself with the pain of paying before you even leave the house, and you should be good. Now, as I said, leave the house, but how does that work with online shopping, which is a method we very much apply and we don't really need to leave the house for. So again, you can prime yourself with the pain of paying, look at your bank balances, think of how much you've already spent in general, but maybe also on the spending platform that you're currently looking at. If you're on Amazon and your bank balance or your bank statement has told you that you've already made 27 purchases from Amazon that month, maybe it's time to stop. I'm not judging, I'm just suggesting. But this is a quick way to do it. Now, another thing with platforms such as Amazon, and I'm just using Amazon as an example here, is that they have very quick purchasing systems. So, for example, with Amazon, as an example, they have the one-click buy system. So for your system 1, the impulsive one that just sees something and is like, yes, I want it, and then just takes it, this is a great system, because you have to click on the product and you have to click on this one-click buy button, and it is yours. Because Amazon does all the rest. It knows your address, your personal details, your payment details. You're good. Don't worry about it. But as such, that makes spending very, very easy. And that is the one thing I'm trying to get away from. I don't want spending to be easy. I don't want spending to be quick. I want spending to be very inconvenient, and I want spending to be almost frustrating. This sounds a bit odd, but this is the best way of making it very, very painful. So the one thing you shouldn't be doing is engage in these super quick one-click or two-click, whatever click, buy systems, because they completely bypass your system 1. Whereas what we want is to activate system 2, get very deliberative, do some weighing of consequences, like would I rather have the product, would I rather have the money, can I even afford this, etc, etc. So what I would recommend to you is to very much get rid of any saved details that you have within these online platforms. So don't save your name, don't save your address, but most importantly, don't save your payment card details. Because what happens with these systems is that because we don't even interact, like we don't even have to pick up a card and put in the number, because who remembers that number by heart, and then the CVC or whatever that code is called. No, we don't have to do any of that. It's super convenient. There's no link to a payment method. Like clicking once is not a payment method. That is not what that means to a consumer, which Amazon knows, obviously. No judgment there again. So what we have here is a company that is very, very clever at completely separating payment from the actual payment and purchasing process. But this is actually the opposite of what we want. So again, if you go online shopping, don't save any of your details. From an information security perspective, also quite smart, makes it slightly more difficult to hack or to steal. Do every single time that you go onto Amazon and you want to buy something, you're gonna have to fill in those details over and over and over again. And this, besides just being annoying, gives system 2, which is more logical, more deliberative, but also more slow, the time to kick in. Because system one is no longer hanging around once you've typed in the second line of your address, and then your name and your payment methods and whatever the numbers are, and once you've had to look for your credit card, probably by this stage you're wondering, do I really need this? Like, is this worth the amount of hassle I'm going through? So for online shopping, use the negative primes that you can also do in the store, and in addition to that, make it difficult. Make payment incredibly difficult. Now, those are two ways that you can work again with the pain of paying. There are other things that mobile spending specifically, which also works with online spending, I suppose, because it's a payment method that's being tracked on your phone, can give us. So mobile banking or mobile spending isn't all bad. It really isn't. The one thing that we've seen, especially with online banks such as Monzo, Starling, Revolut, just to name a few examples, is that everything gets tracked. And that is really, really good. As I've mentioned before, people are terrible at tracking their own expenses. They're just really not good at it. As mental accountants, we're not that great. So mental accounting is another theory, really famous theory from another Nobel Prize winner from the field of behavioral economics, so Richard Taylor, who argued that we actually keep mental accounts in our own heads, which is why they're called mental and not physical. So what we do is we get our money in, so our wages for example, and then we distribute them in our head in different jars. So these jars are reflecting where the money needs to go. So if I have a wage of 1,500, 500 needs to go to rent, put it in that jar, but 300 needs to go to groceries, put it in that jar, and by this stage I have £700 left, and that can be divvied up into other jars, probably one also for saving, one for healthcare, etc., etc. Now, I've mentioned before, people are terrible at doing this, so they are able to do it, it's just they're very incapable of tracking what they have left or how much they've already spent. So then when we look at online banking apps, which are predominantly interacting with a mobile phone device, what we see is that apps can do that for us. So the standard online banking apps, for example Barclays or Lloyds, can also do this, but what we've seen with these online banking apps such as Monzo, who have no physical manifestation like an office that you would go to, like a bank that you would go to in real life, is that they've gotten much better at this. So they give you this pot system, or this jar system, in which you can divvy up your money, you can set up direct debits for these accounts, and then it all becomes automated and you should be good. Your money is going to the costs that you have every month, and you don't really have to interact with it, which is very, very smart, because that also means that you can't spend it before it has to go to your rent, which is a very mandatory expenditure, or your groceries, because you do actually need to eat, and you can't eat the 22nd pair of shoes you bought that year. I should know that. So what happens here is that a lot of it is according to behavioral science, so it is relying on mental accounting, but it's also becoming automated. So you, as the fallible human being, don't actually have to interact with the systems, which work much better, which is great. Now, another thing that these online banks have is actually about forgetting money. So initially I've said forgetting money is bad, and I do forgetting how much you've spent is this bad. That's pretty bad. But what they do, or at least this is a feature of Monzo that I'm aware of, they are able to hide some of your money pots, so the jars that you have. And this is predominantly a feature associated with your savings. So you can have a saving jar, with hopefully some money in it, and you can hide it, at least on the online platform. What this does is it kind of makes you forget that that is money that you have, and that is technically speaking disposable money that you have. So it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. So you won't spend what you've kind of forgotten that you have, meaning that your savings will probably be left alone, at least to a larger extent than they were as if they kept showing up on your homepage every single time you logged in. So this is no longer associated with money that you can spend, which works like a charm. So in total, or in summary, I suppose, to conclude, what we've seen is that there's been a massive evolution of money. and cash is on its way out whether we like this or not. Now, what we've seen with payment methods that are, becoming progressively more popular is that they reduce the pain of paying. And this isn't good. This is the one thing why I would argue that it would be great to stick with cash, but of course that is, for aforementioned reasons, not really that feasible. So we're gonna have to accept the technology as it comes at us, and that's just gonna be it. However, just because there's technological progress doesn't mean that there is any reason for us to just lay down and die. No, we can actually deal with this progress, especially if it has unwanted consequences, as seen with payment methods. The first thing to do is to educate ourselves about what these consequences are. Welcome to this talk. Slightly late introduction. But what we can also do is to, except for just educate us, is to see the consequences that it has, look into the science and see what the science says, and then apply the science, or in this case the behavioral science, behavioral economics, and see what we can do ourselves. Now, the most important part is that we prime the pain of paying. This is a very, very easy payment method to use. Make sure you divvy up your money in jars, so at least when you overspend, which is often seen with these payment methods, that you don't run out of the money that you have to spend on rent. I don't think you should be out on the streets because you can't manage your finances for a single month. So prime the pain of paying, divvy up the money according to mental accounting, but do it via an app, because an app is a lot less fallible than you are. If you have savings that you don't want to touch, hide them away. These are 2 tips which, technically speaking, you could do this in real life, but technology just has made this a lot easier. And that is something to look forward to, especially because when it comes to money and technology has made it much easier to keep track of our spending, which is very, very important. What we also see with these apps is that they show you how much money, both absolute and relative, you're spending on certain categories, for example, going out, shopping, healthcare, etc., which, if you want to change how much you're spending, that is those are very good statistics to have, and they lay at the foundation of a lot of behavioral change. So there are benefits to technology, but make sure you keep in mind that spending on a mobile phone feels very differently than spending cash, and there may be some issues with that, but there are, thankfully, behavioral scientific ways around that. So I hope this was useful. I hope you learned something cool, or at least were entertained for the, I think, half an hour that I've been talking. And I hope you really enjoy the rest of the summit. And I hope you will have thought of some new cool applications of technology in your life through the lens of behavioral science. And I hope you have a good one. Thanks for listening, guys.